What is existence? Well, Ayn Rand had a lot of synonyms. She said reality exists, existence exists. Those are very poetic words. Love it. Word wizardry. You can use it maybe in a song. We can't use that nonsense objectively in a discussion, in a debate. Okay, she included the observer, making it completely existence based on what the observer sensed, very subjective. Knowledge, consciousness, perception, see, touch, and the use of the senses. She said something exists which one perceives. No, absolutely not. Something exists which we define, which meets the definition of exist. That's what exists, not what we perceive. And she says sensation tells man that it exists, an entity exists. No, sensation has nothing to do with it. It's the other way around. Once you kill the sensations, all living entities in the universe, what remains behind is what exists. Okay, that's the way you should look at it. Not discover what exists through sensations. And I gave the example of a magnet around a magnetic field. A magnetic field around a magnet. Here I have a magnet. Okay, I always show that. Okay, that's a magnet. It's got a little. You can see it there. Magnet. Okay. Okay. Now your senses tell you that something is there. Okay. Now you only have one. Can you tell me, without doing any experiment, anything? Can you tell me with your senses, if a magnetic field exists in that magnet, or is it just a piece of metal? How can you tell the difference unless you put it to the test? But you cannot tell me that the magnetic field exists through the senses just by looking at a piece of metal. That's the point, okay? And so no, the senses are useless to determine, especially Mother Nature's invisible mechanisms. And that's what Ayn Rand never figured out, okay? That's simply a fact. So where does Ayn Rand's philosophy lead you? Well, I'll show you where it leads you. It leads you to hell, okay? Yeah, well, I want to put it over here. Let's see. So you can see it here. Okay, the axiom that existence exists means to grasp the fact that the universe, its basic constituent elements, are atoms or subatomic particles or energy. Oh, is that what it is? So she's already proven, she's already confirmed through her senses that particles exist, that quantum is right, that you have subatomic particles, and that energy exists. What is energy? Is it a physical object? Does she require energy to be a physical object before she can talk about the existence of energy? So she has these notions of existence, but she ends up with nonsense. She says that particles exist. So she's confirmed particles. It's a done deal. I have no chance of challenging her because it's already been confirmed, right? Through the senses. And again, you got to think about what she's saying. You got to read her critically. You can't just go over and say, oh, I like what she said about politics. We don't care about politics. Politics is religion. It's not a part of science. There's no such thing as political science. It should be called political religion. Politics is all opinion. Ethics is all opinion. Ethics belongs in church. Okay? There is no such thing as ethical. Okay, ethical is opinion, 100% opinion. Ask the lion when he kills the bull if he has any ethics, if that was unethical of him. Or ask the bull, let's see what opinion he's got. And he'll give you an idea. Okay, so Ayn Rand ends up with defining what an entity is, but as I say in the title of this video, she's going to confuse entity with existence and existence with entity. Like all the other philosophers, so-called philosophers, such as Hume and Kant specifically, who dealt with the same issue, she ends up with the same conclusion, that there's no difference between entity and existence. She thinks that the word physical means existence, and it doesn't. That's ordinary speech. That's the vulgar language. In science, you can't do that. You got to distinguish between entity and existence. And here's her version. Okay, let's go with her version first, and I'll put mine next to that. Entity has to be defined ostensively. That is to say, by pointing. I love that. If she would have stopped there, she would have done a good job, or she would have been in the ballpark, because what do you point to? Can you point to a concept? Can you point to information? Can you point to intelligence? Can you point to energy? No, you can't. You're going to point. You're going to point to some kind of shape, something that has a perimeter, a surface, or something, right? It's got to have shape. And if she would have stopped there, it would have been okay. But she muddled it further by putting an and, by aggregating stuff that didn't belong there. And that shows that she did not understand what an entity is. She says, an entity is a this which you can point to and grasp by human perception. That's where she screwed it up. No, an entity is not that which you grasp by human perception, meaning senses first and then reasoning afterwards, right? After you touch, then you reason, you're conscious, you're aware, and you now make sense of it, right? No, it has nothing to do with the individual. An entity is that which you can point to because the entity has shape, not because you can point to it, not because you do something to it. Okay, so that's where she screwed up. She tried to cover every base, and that means she did not understand what an entity is. Okay, let's be fair here. An entity means a self-sufficient form of existence. No, not really, because an entity, if it's which you can point to, I can point to a square, and a square does not exist. I can point to Superman, and Superman does not exist. And I can point to a tri-bar, and I can point to two-dimensional figures, right? Geometries or whatever, or even, again, figures. I can point to Mickey Mouse or Bugs Bunny. And that doesn't mean that Bugs Bunny exists, okay? And so the fact that I can point and identify a shape does not mean that because of that, the shape that I'm pointing to exists. And again, you have objects that exist and objects that don't exist. You know, we have leprechauns and God, spirits, angels. You know, we have a whole host of imaginary, what are known as imaginary objects that you can't point to. I can draw them, and I can even point to the drawing, but what I'm pointing to, the object that exists, is the paper and the ink, not the figure that, you know, I made with it. Okay, so she didn't realize that difference. Okay, and she said solid things which we can directly perceive. Again, she's equating, and that's why she gets into trouble with existence. She's equating entity with not only that which has shape, but that which is three-dimensional and which exists. And then, of course, she ends up saying, well, there's no difference between existence and an entity, or what she called an existent. You see the problem? The problem is all these people had the same problem. Every one of these so-called philosophers had the same problem because they used ordinary speech. They thought that an object is that which you can point to, and the senses tell you something about it. You can touch or see, maybe. And because of that, they said, oh, yeah, it's got to be something three-dimensional, something you can touch. And then they said, oh, then there's no difference between an object that you can touch and one that exists. And so they equated entity with existence, or in this case, existent to existence. They created this existent, which is this word existent, which is a blend of object with existence. They're both the same. You know, so they call it an existent. Okay? No such monster. And again, an entity is a solid thing open to human perception. When she put human perception and capable of independent action, well, independent action, yeah, but again, squares don't move. Okay, typically they don't move. If they do, you had too many beers to drink. Okay, but here she screwed it up completely, and you see how she had no notion whatsoever, no knowledge, no understanding of what an entity is. An entity is a thing. No kidding. Synonym. An entity is a solid thing with a definite boundary. So far, so good. But then she says, as against a fluid, which, such as air. Air is not an entity. These are her words, okay? When the wind moves as one mass, you can call it that. Fluids are not entities. So she says water is not an entity, not a thing, for the purposes of her philosophy, obviously, objectivism. And neither is air. Why? Because according to her, it doesn't have a definite surface. I mean, I can't point to that blob, so blobs are not entities. The blob is constantly moving, or maybe it doesn't have shape to begin with, or the water takes the shape of the glass and the air takes the shape of the balloon. That's its volume, right? So because of that, air itself is not a thing, and neither is water. So it turns out that you can point to a square, you can point to water, but they're not entities. So what sense does it make with her initial statement there that an entity is that which you can point to? She's got contradictions because she did not understand what an entity is. And again, I keep saying the definition of the word object destroys all religion, and it destroys Ayn Rand's religion, which was just politics and ethics and stuff that has nothing to do with anything. Okay, so what is an entity in rational science? Well, you have there that first you kill the senses, and yeah, an entity, tribar is an entity. It's a thing because it has shape, but it's an inexistent entity in the case of the tribar. So is Superman, so is Snow White, and so on. And air we cannot see. We fortunately, because if we could see the air, we wouldn't be able to see the wall. So thank God that Mother Nature, made air invisible, because otherwise we'd be in a lot of trouble. Yeah, air is a physical object. I know that sounds terrible in your ears, and that only sounds terrible because you're used to thinking of things as that which you can touch or see. But air is a thing, and so is water. They're made out of atoms, so they had better be objects. Okay, anything made out of atoms for sure belongs in the list of objects. And so not every object can be seen, and not every object can be touched. People don't understand that. They have a trouble with that because we're used to thinking of see, touch as the criteria for objects. Okay, and so what is an entity? Well, here it is. Here you have an entity. Okay, any blob, anything that has shape is a thing. It's an entity, whatever that is. You don't care. It has shape, and it has to have shape all on its own without your eyes. You should be dead, and that still should be an entity. It should still have shape, irrespective of whether you're alive or not. Okay? So it doesn't depend on our consciousness, which is what Ayn Rand essentially was saying, because she was trying to set the foundations for her philosophy, her political recommendations of how we should live in society, how should we behave. And so she tailored her definitions for that purpose. And that's why she screwed up. She started from the end and worked herself backwards rather than starting at putting the objective foundations first and then working from there to her philosophy. And she didn't care about that because she was trying to get her message of how to live and, what should be the ideal political system. She was like Plato and all these other people who just talked about, what they thought was the correct form to govern people. Okay, that's what they were into. Okay,